Hello, everybody, and welcome to AI People. Today, we're talking to Yariv Adan, who is a general partner at Ellipsis Venture, which is a seed stage VC firm focusing on AI for startups. Greetings, Yariv.
Hey, nice to be here, and thank you.
Yeah, no worries. So we always kick off every podcast by doing a prediction section for the AI industry as a whole. So first question is, how do you see humans and AI collaborating with regard to work in 5 years' time and in 15 years' time?
In 5 years' time, I think that we will not see, in terms of the percent of population working and how many work hours and work days we're working. So I don't think we will see yet a change in that. But I think people will be more productive and will be using AI, to a large degree. I think a lot of the work that currently is being done by people will be done completely by AI. So people will actually be able to do more complex, bigger scale, more managerial. So I think like in 5 years, it will be more people managing large teams of AI.
Mm-hmm.
I think that in 15 years, I think the landscape is going to change significantly, at least in sectors and industries. And I think we might see more and more areas trying shorter work weeks, less hours, and people actually doing more stuff other than work. I think we'll start seeing. I think that when we look 100 years back, and people work 24/7 in factories, farmers, and had much less education. I think like when we shift not 100 years but 15, 20 years, we will see similar. People maybe studying for more years and having time for other activities rather than I think that people will look back and will not understand how we did 40 hours a week labor.
Yeah. How do we survive?
Yeah.
So just to jump back to that kind of 5 years point. So it's something that I've heard quite a few times in terms of humans kind of managing kind of teams of agents or kind of AI applications, whatever it may be. Do you think we're going to need to kind of learn new skills? Because obviously that's something that kind of people aren't necessarily doing, right now, or kind of used to that kind of management piece in a lot of roles.
I don't think so. Right? So actually, if you look at our fund, we're actually 2 GPs and that's it. And we're actually managing our team of AIs inside the fund, and we're actually developing it. And I actually gave a few classes to new people, how to use AI. And I think there are 3 very basic rules. The first one is just ask it. Don't be afraid to ask it. Don't be afraid to use it. It's not judging you. It's not getting frustrated. It's not getting bored. It's not getting tired. So really, you can actually, repeat, and the iteration times, are very quick. So actually, you can ask. The second thing is ask it how to ask it. Like, you don't need to create the perfect prompt. You can, like, I always start, with a really bad prompt. I just tell it, hey, look, this is what I want to do. Here's very rough how I think about it. Please give me a good prompt on how to ask you how to do that. Like, and it works like, hey, I want to learn a new language. Please suggest me ways. And then suddenly the model comes out, oh, I can actually simulate this situation. I can actually, do like as if you're on a call. I can be a teacher. I can be a student. I can be a child. Like, it comes with ideas. So actually ask it how to ask it, I think, is another way that actually helps you to use these tools. And the third thing that I always tell people, and maybe some of these things will come automatically, is always let the model reflect. So once the model answer, ask it, hey, do you think this is the best? Or, challenge yourself. So I think like actually the skills, because I think this model is very capable. The skills are more about like, hey, how do you suggest we should do the work? Look at your output. Is that, so for example, now I always ask, please suggest a plan. And then I ask it, hey, does this plan actually match the goals that I said? Would you recommend different goals? So I think like, I don't think it's like hard skills. I think it's soft skills, and I think it's relatively easy soft skills. I think you need to be an expert on what you want to achieve. You don't need to be an expert in technology anymore. That expertise basically went away.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it can also help you know what you want, because I think many people don't really know what they want. But there is
Sure. That's the hard bit now. Yeah.
But I think there are so many best practices, right? Like, so for example, if I want to do X, I can ask it, actually, can you look on the internet and find 5 best ways that people actually found to do X, and suggest, tell me the pros and cons, and let me choose from that how I want to do my thing. So I think, again, they can guide you both in the planning, in the ideation, in the execution, in the management. So I think that all people need to do is to be open-minded. That's my opinion. So.
And where do you think we are on the kind of AGI question? You can put your own kind of definition on that, but is that something that we're getting close to now, or is it the perennial 20 years away?
Yeah. I look at the question, I think models will be better than humans to a great degree, much before they will be good, or even, I'm not talking about AGI. Because I think, like, humans, I don't think that humans are that great at most work. I think we're just very blind to the amount of resources and investments that we're doing in getting humans to do work and to controlling it. I think, like, if you think today, actually getting a person to be productive takes months and sometimes a year, depending on the role. And if you think on any organization, there is one layer at most that does the actual work, and even not so, because some of the people are supporting. All the other layers, the management and whatnot, are actually artificial layers that we added to deal with our inability to scale and to manage people's shortcomings. When you're using AI, you are spending, like, 10 minutes to do your prompt. If it doesn't work, you give up. So if you actually put, I argue, 10 to 20% of the effort to actually create good prompts, to provide examples and whatnot, and you can use AI to do that, I think very quickly you get to human level. It's not AGI. It's like I think equivalent. I think like much better than humans, but the good thing is, once you iterate on an agent, it's very replicable. You can now scale it 1,000, 1 million people you train one by one. So I don't think the question is AGI, unless you want to philosophize. I think the question is, on most relevant tasks and productive tasks, how far are we from being as good as humans? I think we're better at most, just because it can analyze much more content, it can search much better, it can access many more tools, it works much faster. And you see that actually people that use AI, they're productive. So yes, I think, like, in the short term, we'll see that more and more doing the actual work, AI is better. I think most of the work is generating some output, getting some input, storing it somewhere, doing some function on that. So I think that would be greatly automated.
And in terms of the global economy, how do you see AI reshaping that over the next kind of 10 to 20 year time frame? Do you think we're going to get much greater wealth inequality, or do you think we're going to narrow gaps in opportunity and bring kind of everybody up?
So I have multiple thoughts. I think first, what AI will do, I think it will be a very large economy, but it will be to a large extent commoditized. So the way I think is that basically intelligence becomes a utility. When you travel to places where water and electricity don't exist, like Africa, you realize how magical having this capability is. When you think about it, generating fresh water and electricity is high tech. You have pumps, grids and stuff, very similar to data centers, but we actually consume it as a utility. Almost everyone, in the developed worlds have it, and at a very affordable price. I think that to a large extent, intelligence is the same. I think today you can squint and see that, kind of model is all you need. If you pay the $200 worth of ChatGPT or Gemini or Claude today, you actually have a large majority of the apps that you need in terms of, and if you extrapolate to 3 to 5 years, I actually think that you cover majority of the enterprise. So I think it will be a very large economy that will replace software, that will replace many services, but at a low margin. And so I think like, what does that mean? I think in terms of services, I think that a lot of people will have access to better education, better health system, better wellness, better financial management, basically services that are currently only available to the top 1% or less, or maybe not available because some technology doesn't exist, I think has the opportunity to be available to everyone. I think, like I said, the business will be mostly low margin. Who will make the profits? I assume it will be a small amount of providers that will make most of the profits. I think there will be distributed services, but I don't think it will be, large amount of unique differentiated service providers. I think there is a lot of questions. First, I think the first question that will come, it will be on the VC model. The VC model assumes, kind of high margins, high multiples, and all of that. I think that will be the model that will hit the first one, because I think like companies, we're seeing it already today that actually companies can bootstrap and grow very quickly with very little resources. And there is a question whether the high multiplies and the investment and the equity makes sense. I think at the 20-year time, I wonder whether the assumption of this large industrial company that needs capex and opex is also questionable. And then the whole notion of the markets and the stock market, and do you need to go out and raise a lot of money? What does that mean? I think that's also, I think, a lurking question. I think it will take a longer time. I expect that in the next 5 years, there will be 2 aha moments. I think one aha moment is that suddenly we'll start seeing the SaaS companies, like known brands, that suddenly, 50% revenue drops because they are disrupted by AI. And that will be, oh, wow, actually, this thing is eating into the software business. I think the second aha moment will be kind of an AI first services company. I don't know, it will be like an AI first McKinsey or an AI first legal company or insurance, that suddenly will hit, I don't know, $1 billion with like very few employees and mostly agents, and people, oh, wow, this is coming too. And I think that when this will happen, suddenly everyone, all of this hand waving that I'm currently doing on low margin and AI first, people will actually, oh, we see this coming. And I think this will be actually the first signs for that I actually expect in the next 5 years. But again, I don't have a crystal ball. Crystal balls are always broken. Reality, always, people say, we're overestimating on the short term, underestimating on the longer term. No one 5 years before ChatGPT or 2 years before ChatGPT could see ChatGPT coming. I think if 2 years ago I would tell you that you can do what you can do with Claude Code today, you would tell me that I am imagining. People are saying, hey, 10 or 15 years ago, we thought that self-driving cars are around the corner, and nobody thought about the Gen AI and large language models, right? And it's completely flipped. So and then RL was around the corner, and that flipped.
It's difficult to predict, but I suppose that's your job, isn't it, to kind of think about the future and try and predict where it's going. So just before we kind of jump into kind of Ellipsis and get into more detail on your work there, could you just give us a quick kind of introduction to yourself and your journey sort of through the Google machine and what's brought you to the VC world?
Yeah. So I'm actually, I'm kind of a builder. I built products all my life that became an investor. Originally from Israel, so I started my career in the Israeli startup scene. The first startup was like in 1998. So at the time it was, .com boom, very early days of Israeli VC and Israeli startup scene. And then I stayed in Israel until 2007. So really the thing explode and the first successes happened. So that was, and I was always in engineering and engineering leadership roles. And then in 2007, I moved to Google and moved to product and moved to Switzerland. And in 2015, I was bit by the AI bug. And then I was, together with a few friends, we were the co-founding team of what became the Google Assistant. And then we started also what became Google Lens. So, and back then we were actually, my first job out of in Israel, it's in the army. I was teaching people that retired from the government how to use Windows, and I saw people struggling using the mouse. So, we were inspired then to say, hey, we're moving from an era where we needed to learn how to use computers to where computers are learning how to communicate like us. That was like kind of the vision that excited us. This is like 2015. And to be honest, we thought that we are closer to the ChatGPT moment than actually turned out, right? Like it took like 6-7 years actually to get there. But a lot of the ideas and the thoughts were already there. And then after 5 years in the consumer side of AI, really working on the cutting edge Google stuff on consumer, I moved together with my Eng partner from Assistant and Lens to Google Cloud AI. First, we led conversational AI, so the language and the speech models, And then when ChatGPT happened, we found ourselves leading applied Gen AI, and I spent 2 years really on that front. And then early last year, left Google to start Ellipsis. It was very clear to me that after working at Google, going to a single company seemed too small. I wanted to scale myself. Google operates at such a crazy scale. And it was clear to me that the way to do it is working with different companies. So connected with a bunch of old friends with similar experience like in AI, founders, serial entrepreneurs, Google researchers. And we decided to have a fund that invests very early on and be very hands-on, work with the founders, do whatever they need to make them successful. And that's Ellipsis. So we invest in AI deep tech. So we invest, like I said, when we are looking at the future, we believe that AI and software is mostly commoditized. So we're looking for companies that can actually survive this commoditization. And when we're looking, we believe that the only moats are either data moats, so a problem that requires unique data that is not easily accessible for large models, or unique expertise that is required to solve these hard problems. And again, given that models are becoming very, very smart and very, very capable, right, that the bar is high. Yeah.
So when you're kind of talking to a new founding team, for example, and you talk about that kind of expertise moat, if you like, are you thinking kind of technical expertise there or business expertise?
So we are looking at two main areas, right? So one area we're looking at kind of very large level automation. Think like, so for example, agent for automating manufacturing, agent for designing a really novel drugs, right? So here there is both technical, but there is also usually very scientific and complex domain expertise. And the data that is required either needs to be generated, doesn't exist, or needs to be collected from places that don't exist outside, right? So for example, for manufacturing or other stuff. So that's one area. So really complex automation, domain expertise, scientific. We really like where science or domain expertise are involved. The second area that we're looking at, and is more technical expertise, we believe that a new Gen AI stack is being built. Most of it will be built by big tech, but with any transformation, there are always pockets of expertise within that stack that will be built most probably by small teams of experts. Security is one example where you see, people maybe running on device, really optimizing on devices, because there's still defense, robotics, network, other places where the device is given, you cannot get the best NVIDIA and you still want to run models. So how do you optimize for that? Payments and identity are some areas. So we're also looking for this kind of areas and really looking for the top experts in these domains. Yeah. So yes.
And when a team's pitching to you, what are the things that will make it kind of pop and stand out, or equally, what are the things that make it kind of fall flat?
So I think some of it most of it is a kind of greenfield. It's always the same, right? First thing is the team, right? You're looking at the team. The first thing you're asking yourself, is that a team that can actually build and scale a business, right? Can they hire? Can they fire? Can they raise? Can they get partners? Can they get customers? Can they deal with crises? And of course, the best signal is repeat founders, but also there is they need to have some record of excellence. I think the second thing you ask yourself you should always assume that whenever someone comes to you with an idea, there is 100 other teams. So why this team will be, one or order of one that will be successful? They need to be like kind of top intellect and top executors, but also like, especially like when you were saying you need expertise, are they really the top experts in the world in this expertise or among the top experts, right? We look at that. We're looking at like, does the team, do they have all the function, the technical, the product, the go-to-market, and it's okay if they don't have, but are they aware, right? So you look on in the dynamics between the team, right? So I think like definitely early on the team is a big aspect. We're looking at the problem space. Like, is that the problem space that we think? And this is like when I said before, like when we're looking for expertise and data, it's not that the solution requires expertise and data, it's that the problem. Is this a problem that really cannot be solved unless you have this rare expertise and rare data? So we look deeply into the problem, because the solutions, vary, and we do know that also the problem space can vary, but generally. And then you look at additional variable, but then like, especially early on, it's a spectrum, right? You do look at the go-to-market, like is there an existing market or do you need to create one? Are there existing buyers, users, and budgets, or do you need to create one? Are there tailwinds or headwinds? Is this an area where big tech is involved or not, right? You look kind of the thing, and you do look a little bit, especially if they have some kind of technology. Do they have IP? Is it really unique? Is it defensible? But like, especially early on, right? Almost all of these decisions, other than maybe the team and some of the problem space, are like, it's not like, black and white. But then like sometimes, okay, how do we mitigate these risks? Yeah.
Because I think I've seen you talk before about kind of gut feel and the VC industry. How much of these decisions which you're making there, because as you said, there's so many different variables like across all of those pieces, how much of that is kind of just your instinct making those decisions, or how much are you applying kind of data or some kind of, heuristic that you've come up with yourself?
So I think like, at the end, in my opinion, that the very elementary question of a VC to invest or not invest is, given an idea, is this impossible and not worth doing? Is this trivial and going to be commoditized or highly competitive? Or is this in the sweet spot that it's very, very hard, but actually doable, and this is the ones you need to get? And I believe that, and the problem is that in the past, in kind of the SaaS model or other industries, we kind of had the rules to know where it falls. Gen AI is moving so fast and so new that the foundations don't exist. And you actually almost need to look at a case by case and understand. And many times I actually think it's called bullshit. So I do like a lot of the stuff, and I think that's the key differentiator for us, is actually having that insight and intuition on understanding AI, understanding what it takes to build AI, what it takes to bring AI products into the market, and then like actually hear and say, okay, where does that fall within these buckets, right? And it is also a function of the team and the problem and the other stuff. And I think especially today, the biggest challenge is that many times teams make very big claims, and we see because a lot of VCs actually come to us, they like to bring us as the AI experts, and they tell us, hey, these guys are claiming to have discovered a new model that have these new characteristics. Can you talk to them and see? And many times it falls either to that, no, there is no substance. On best case, it's academic, but actually in the academia, the idea has been discussed, for 30 years, and nothing happened that actually, or they don't have anything that is new or making a difference now. Or on the other hand, yeah, it sounds very, bombastic, but actually it's trivial, and yeah, like we believe that within 1-2 years, like, it can be done. So I think like actually there is a lot of know-how to actually make an informed decision on what is doable and rightly, at like, between not like, rainbows and making up stuff, dreamers, but also not going to be commoditized in the next 2 to 3 years. Because when you invest, you're making right investment to the next 5 years. I think there will be a ton of liquidity. I think a lot of companies, a lot of SaaS companies will realize in the next 2 to 3 years that they cannot compete with the pure Gen AI, and they will acquire. But acquisition is always a hit and miss, and you need to, if you're counting on an acquisition exit, you need to catch one of the few ones that will be acquired. Yeah.
And there's, obviously a perception that there's so much hype in the AI industry, just like roughly in kind of percentage terms, like how much of what comes to your desk do you feel is hype and how much is actually substance when you kind of look at it a bit more deeply?
So I think the hype actually, if you ask me where is and a lot of this is, will disagree and maybe get pissed at me, but I think the hype and the bubble is actually in companies that already today are very highly valued. And I think they have been first movers. So when you automate things, I think there's very easy money on the table because like I said at the beginning, I think that humans today are not very efficient. Actually, to automate and save on how organizations are operating today, it's not just saving, improving the top line and bottom line of businesses today, I don't think it's that hard. And I think there are some fast movers that are doing, good job, and they are evaluated, at hundreds of millions. But I think once you make that saving, that thing happens once, and now you're at the baseline of running this thing. The cost of running this automation is the new baseline. The models on top are mostly commoditized. And I do think that when you are in an economy that is extremely competitive and extremely commoditized, eventually you compete on price. Mm-hmm. And I think eventually and we're seeing it in the models, right? The models are amazing, but they're like every year, like it goes 90% lower because of competition. So I think like some of these companies that were first movers and raised a lot and high valuation, I think they will struggle over time. And I think in 2 to 3 years, and of course, having revenue at the beginning is kind of a moat for itself. But I think actually a lot of this revenue goes directly to the model. So actually the model revenue doesn't mean profit necessarily. So the moat doesn't necessarily exist. And I think so I think a lot of these early movers, I think this is where the bubble is. I also think that, and again, I think that brand for software will not be as important. I think that software will be used to buy software. Mm-hmm. You'll basically just you will say, here's the software I'm looking for, please find the best one, and you run evals. So I think actually that the advantage of being a first mover will also diminish, but eventually you'll actually, the model will make the procurement decisions. So these are like, very, very big claims, but I think that the economy of software is going to change. And I think that companies that have high valuations might suffer, and I think that might be where the bubble. So I don't think the bubble is at the size of the AI economy. I think the bubble is in the valuation of certain companies that don't really have a defensible moat and a right for high margins on the longer term.
No, fair enough. Sounds like bad news for the kind of marketing folks who might be listening in terms of kind of, brand becoming less effective.
Marketing and product, right? Like, I think that we are moving to a world that is largely Excel. So, Excel, you don't have products on top of Excel. The end user does the last mile. And it doesn't need to be really the end user. It could be that person on your team that knows how to use Excel. Or maybe you're even hiring someone to create for you an Excel. But you are not buying a product and paying ongoing a license or whatever other fees for your Excel sheets. And I think Gen AI to a large degree will be that. I think that the users will actually do the last mile. And I think there is a lot of very large businesses today, the Accentures and the Deloittes, that the SaaS business and others is at high question. I think they will do a lot of this implementation at cost plus, which will apply even more pressure on the margins. So I think like the economics of software, right? Like if you look at the current model of SaaS, right? It's an economy of scale. There is an expertise in hiring the scarce resource of engineers and how to run a very successful engineering process. As a result, one company develops software for many other companies. As a result, the implementation, because it's always like 70% of what you need. The last integration and implementation is still a very big project. right? So you are paying for that. And then there is provider lock-in. And because you built it, it needs to last. Because it needs to last, there is backwards compatibility, right? So there is further a complexity and cost. If you're thinking, no, now software, I'm not buying just generic, I'm going to generate whatever I need for the task that I'm currently doing, you'll generate, use it, and throw it away, and it's much simpler and cheaper. And I think the whole dynamics of build versus buy is changing. So yeah, I think we're going to see a big earthquake on how software is being built, sold, and used compared to the current world. And of course, it's not within a matter of days. But yeah, I think to a large extent, the frontier models will do most of the jobs.
And if you look at the kind of AI tech stack as it exists today, so you've got like the frontier models and then the kind of picks and shovels that go around that in terms of like development platforms and observability platforms and governance platforms. Like what do you feel is broken or missing in the tech stack which engineers are using today?
So I think like, we haven't yet figured out how to use it properly, right? Like, I think, software is being used very meticulously. Like when you look at software processes that are very complicated, right? It's a funny industry. First, it's like, it's riddled with bugs, right? Like actually every company has tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of bugs that will never be fixed. You constantly get upgrades and patches, but there is like, if you think how software is being written, right? Like, there is a design process that whole teams are taking part of it and reviewing it multiple times. And then there's like, there is like product design, and then you like, architectural design, high level design, detail design, you break it between, right? And then like, every time you do code review and people review it, I like, it's a very meticulous, and then there is QA, and we actually trained people and we chose people that are very meticulous and can go deep. And I think on the AI, because it's like kind of a prompt and whatnot, and like we're doing, like everyone is doing it, I think we haven't yet figured out what is the right process and the right set of tools. So I don't think anything yet is there. No, and also like we're now in kind of middle land. We are using AI, but we're still building this software that is supposed to last, so you need to maintain it, right? And you need to fix bugs. We're not yet really doing this ephemeral, I use it now once and I throw it away. Next time I do it, I will just generate it again. So I'm not sure that we need all that complexity, right? And for example, now I'm using Claude Code, right? And you basically iterate it because the iteration loops are so quickly, right? Like you do it, and you at some point you even like you don't check the code, and at the moment it's working for more local code bases, but I think it will expand. So I think like if we will end up in kind of the traditional software where you have design and you maintain the code and you fix bugs, this is where the picks and shovels are being built, and I think they are needed, right? Like you need to see, how do I do the design review? How do I do the application management once in production, right? And the model changes. How do you deal with all these like things that change under the hood? So I think like for that world, we're still missing a lot of the IDEs, the code development, the testing, and I think there is a lot of tools being built. I think the more interesting world is the one where AI is generating just in time ephemeral software.
Kind of fast fashion.
Yeah, you just use it once and you throw it away. And I think in that world, you need much less management tools. But I assume we will live in both worlds for quite a few years. And we still have these mainframe computers running back. So I think that many industries will still use the current stack. So yeah, so I think like we will see all of these dev tools that bring the best of both worlds of SaaS and AI. And I don't think we still have I don't think we have any clear solution of this is how it needs to look like, or here's the winner. We ourselves invested in some interesting. We invested in an Israeli company called Arato AI, that they are really saying, they come from application management, right? They are saying, you have an application in production, and every time a new paradigm comes, web apps, mobile apps, cloud apps, you need to think to a whole new world, right? Mobile is all the versions of mobile and all the app stores and stuff like that. Cloud, of course, and web, each one of them introduced this. How do you manage this application in production? Now they're saying, okay, now you have AI, and suddenly, MCP protocols, the model change, the prompt change, whatever changes under the hood, how do you keep your production app, under control, right? So I think that's a very interesting a problem, an interesting company that requires expertise and understanding of the domain of application management and of AI and product and engineering development. So I think that's an example that I think definitely a solution, because we will live with that. Once complex AI comes into production, how do you manage them, is an unsolved. We invested in another company that is called LogicStar, that they are actually doing automation, verification, and solving of bugs, and simulating, because one of the problems with bugs is how do you simulate the customer environment, right? With whatever other systems that you integrate with, right? So I think that's also another problem, and a big one and a complex one, that there isn't a winner yet. So I think we're just at the beginning, and I don't think any company yet has a really production scale deployed Gen AI plus software, right? this hybrid model, right? Everyone is still more isolated AI experiences that are simpler. And of course, how do you make development more efficient? We've seen some researchers that are asking, are you really making engineers more productive and whatnot, right? It's so yeah, I think there's a ton of headroom to figure out, right? The tools are coming so fast, and we don't have the foundations and the workflows. It's a very different talent, yeah.
Still a lot of puzzles to solve.
Yeah.
So how do you think about the kind of European AI landscape? Can you just speak a little bit about where we are now, from a European ecosystem compared to the US and Israel?
Yeah, it's interesting, right? So I think so I like Europe, and I think I like Europe for two main reasons. First, being a very techy fun, Europe has amazing universities and amazing talents coming from it, and it has actually some very good industries that are also very technical, manufacturing, medical, many other, right? So it has the potential. I think many hubs in Europe, so for example, Switzerland is a very interesting hub, right? Actually Zurich is becoming hot, and definitely the universities here, ETH especially, have been generating a lot of spin-offs. Google brought 5,000, 6,000 engineers here, and they're starting to span an industry. I think looking at Israel is an equivalent. I think in Europe, what I would love to see in founders first is the global thinking. A lot of founders here are thinking locally or DACH, and you really need to think, the major market is the US, and be global from day one. And it's fine if you are seeing a region, but you shouldn't limit yourself. So I think if you go and talk to Israeli founders, all of them are even in the late 90s, it was always engineering in Israel, but go to market in the US. I think the sense of urgency in the US and in Israel is much higher than in Europe. I think generally Europe is slower. And if you ask me what's the best signal for a startup or any team, are they good or bad, will they succeed or not, it's velocity. Because I think at the end, most companies start from an almost random starting point, and then it's just a question of how fast can you actually, it's like a model, how fast
progress
to get to the right place. And I think that the velocity in the US and in Israel is much, much faster than the velocity of startups. And again, I'm very generalizing. But in Israel, if you want to talk to a founder, you go, okay, let's talk today. In Europe, okay, let's talk in a week or two, right? So I think the culture is not as, I don't know if you call it aggressive or or execution oriented as it should be, because it's a very competitive space. But I think like the talent is here, and actually the very good for founder, very good for VCs, but I actually think also for founders, I think the valuations are more sane. And I actually think that having a sane valuation is good also for the founder, because any chart in the world goes up and down other than startup valuation. If your valuation goes down, you're doomed. Getting out of a down round is very, very hard. So actually, not, starting, more realistically is good for the founders as well. So I think like Europe has the potential, but really think globally, execute at a higher velocity and sense of urgency. And then I think like Europe can be competitive. Yeah.
So last question, if you were starting a new company today, what would you build?
I think there are two directions that, well, like I would, it's very personal, right? But I would like want to build something that would make the world a better place. I specifically, I had an accident. I have a paralyzed arm. I have a chronic pain. I would do something in the health and in the chronic condition space. I think there is a huge headroom to improve over there, and do with AI and so I think like, it could be a great business. I think it's like huge value to humanity. I think there is a why now, and there is a very strong personal story for me. So
Okay, well, we'll watch out for that one in a few years' time then. It's been great having you on, Yariv. If people want to get in touch, what's the best way to reach you? Where do you live? LinkedIn or X or?
I think LinkedIn is the easiest. Yeah.
Good stuff. Okay, well, thank you for your time, and thanks to everybody watching, and stay tuned for the next episode of AI People coming soon.